She had one meal left. One. Enough flour and oil to feed her son, then starve. Then a stranger showed up at her door and asked her to feed him first. What she did next didn't just save her son's life. It changed the course of a nation. This is the story of the Widow of Zarephath. Picture a land that has forgotten what rain feels like. For 3 years, not a single cloud has broken open over the hills of Phoenicia. The rivers that once ran silver have shrunk to cracked, brown scars in the earth. The olive trees, once heavy with fruit, stand like skeletons, their branches brittle and bare. Dust rises with every step, coating everything in a fine gray film, the color of hunger. This is the 9th century BC, and this drought isn't just weather. It's a verdict. Up in the kingdom of Israel, a prophet named Elijah had stood before King Ahab and declared, in the name of the Lord, that no rain or dew would fall until he said so. Ahab was a king who had married a foreign princess named Jezebel, and together they had filled the land with the worship of a storm god named Baal, a god who was supposed to control the rain. So when the sky closed up and stayed closed for 3 relentless years, it wasn't just a natural disaster. It was a direct challenge to everything the king and queen believed in. Baal could not deliver. The land was dying, and everyone knew it. But this story isn't really about the king in his palace. It's about a woman nobody in that palace would ever think to notice. Follow the dust road south out of Israel entirely, into the pagan territory of Phoenicia, Jezebel's own homeland, to a small town on the coast called Zarephath. Here, life has always been hard for those without wealth or status. And now, with 3 years of drought choking the land, it is nearly impossible. In Zarephath lives a widow. We are never told her name. In the culture of her time, a widow without sons to provide for her was among the most vulnerable people alive. No husband to protect her, no land of her own, no safety net. She has exactly one thing left in this world that matters to her, her son. And she has almost nothing left to feed him with. When we meet her, she is out gathering sticks at the edge of town, not for warmth, but for one final fire. In her house sits a small jar with a handful of flour scraped along the bottom, and a jug with a few drops of oil clinging to the sides. That's it. That is the sum total of her household's wealth. She has already done the math in her head, the terrible arithmetic of a mother watching her child starve. Enough for one more small meal, and then nothing. She plans to cook it, share it with her son, and then, in her own words, wait to die. Meanwhile, far to the north, chaos reigns. Ahab is furious, hunting for the man who called down this drought. Jezebel has begun a violent purge of anyone loyal to the God of Israel, killing off prophets by the sword. Elijah himself is a marked man, a fugitive with a bounty on his silence. The most powerful people in the region are locked in a battle of pride, politics, and vengeance. And it is into this collision, between a starving widow at the very bottom of society and a hunted prophet at the center of a national crisis, that God is about to step. Not through the palace, not through the army, through a woman gathering sticks by a city gate, who doesn't even worship the God who is about to change her life. Scripture tells us that the word of the Lord came to Elijah with unusual specificity. He isn't told simply to flee south, he's told exactly where to go. Arise, go to Zarephath, which belongs to Sidon, and dwell there. Behold, I have commanded a widow there to provide for you. So Elijah walks out of Israel into enemy territory, into the homeland of the very queen who wants him dead. It's a strange kind of safety, hiding in plain sight in the last place anyone would look for a prophet of Israel's God, a Phoenician town devoted to Baal. He arrives at the gate of Zarephath and sees a woman gathering sticks. Somehow, he knows this is her, the widow he was told about, and he calls out to her with a request that sounds simple on the surface but is almost unthinkable underneath. Please bring me a little water in a vessel that I may drink. She turns to go get it. A small kindness, water is precious but not impossible to spare. But before she's gone far, he calls out again, and this time the request escalates into something far heavier. Bring me a morsel of bread in your hand. Now put yourself inside her mind for a moment. This stranger, a foreigner, by his accent and dress clearly an Israelite, clearly not from around here, is asking a starving widow for food. Not spare food, not leftover food. Her food, the last of it. She answers him with a raw, unfiltered honesty that tells us exactly where she stands emotionally. As the Lord your God lives, I have nothing baked, only a handful of flour in a jar and a little oil in a jug. And now I am gathering a couple of sticks, that I may go in and prepare it for myself and my son, that we may eat it and die. This is where the story asks its hardest question. What does Elijah do with that honesty? He doesn't apologize and walk away. He doesn't offer sympathy and move on to find someone with more to give. Instead, he says something that must have sounded almost cruel in the moment. Do not fear, go and do as you have said. But first make me a small cake from it and bring it to me, and afterward make something for yourself and your son. Will she act on fear, which is completely rational and justified? Or will she act on the strange, thin thread of a promise spoken by a stranger from an enemy nation? And what she does next is the hinge on which the entire story turns. She goes and does as Elijah said. Read that sentence again because it deserves to be sat with. She goes and does as Elijah said. No recorded protest. No demand for proof first. No hedging her bets by making a small cake for her son and only crumbs for the prophet. She takes her last handful of flour, her last drops of oil, and she makes the bread for a hungry stranger first. This is one of the most staggering acts of faith recorded anywhere in Scripture, and it comes not from a patriarch, not from a king, not from a prophet, but from an anonymous, foreign, impoverished widow who had every earthly reason to say no. And then the miracle happens, not with thunder, not with a flash of light, quietly, almost invisibly. The jar of flour was not spent, and the jug of oil did not become empty. Day after day, she reaches into that jar expecting to find the bottom, and day after day, there's just enough. Not overflowing abundance, not a warehouse of grain, just enough every single day exactly as needed. And for a while, it seems like the story might simply end there. A beautiful, quiet miracle of provision. A woman saved from starvation. A prophet kept safe. A household sustained through famine. But Scripture isn't finished with her yet. The greatest test of her faith hasn't happened. Time passes. We don't know exactly how long enough for the daily miracle of the jar and the jug to become almost normal. A steady rhythm of grace the widow and her son have learned to live inside. The famine rages on outside, but inside her small home, there is bread every day. There is life. Then, without warning, everything collapses again. Her son becomes ill, and this is not a minor fever that passes with rest. Scripture tells us plainly. His illness was so severe that there was no breath left in him. Her son, the only reason she had been willing to trust a stranger with her last handful of flour, the very center of everything she had left to live for, stops breathing. He dies in her arms. If the request for bread was a test of faith, this is something else entirely. This is the collapse of faith's foundation. What good was the miracle of the jar, she might have thought, if it only kept them both alive long enough for her to watch him die anyway? And in her anguish, she turns on the one person she has trusted with everything, Elijah. What have you against me, O man of God? You have come to me to bring my sin to remembrance and to cause the death of my son. Elijah doesn't defend himself. He doesn't correct her theology in that moment. He simply says, "Give me your son." And he takes the boy's body from her arms, up to the upper room where he is staying, and lays him on his own bed. What follows is one of the most intimate, vulnerable scenes in the entire Old Testament. Elijah, a man of thunderous public declarations, a man who has stood before kings without flinching, is now alone in a small room with a dead child, and he cries out to God, not with confidence, but with something close to confusion and desperation of his own. "O Lord my God, have you brought calamity even upon the widow with whom I sojourn by killing her son?" Then he stretches himself out over the boy's body 3 times, praying with everything in him, "O Lord my God, let this child's life come into him again." And the Lord listens. The boy's breath returns. His life comes back into him. Elijah carries him down the stairs and places him back into his mother's arms, saying simply, "See, your son lives." This is the first recorded resurrection in the Bible. before Elisha raises the Shunammite's son, before Jesus raises Lazarus, or the widow's son at Nain or Jairus' daughter. Before any of those, there is this moment. A Phoenician boy in a small coastal town, brought back from death because his mother once chose to trust a hungry, hunted stranger with her last handful of flour. And notice how the widow responds. Her words are no longer the resigned despair we heard at the city gate. Now she says, "Now I know that you are a man of God, and that the word of the Lord in your mouth is truth." Her faith, which began as a desperate, uncertain act of obedience, has now become full, unshakable conviction. The God who provided daily bread has proven himself the God who conquers death itself. So why does this story, an obscure widow in a forgotten Phoenician town, thousands of years ago, still matter to us now? Because most of us know exactly what it feels like to stare into an empty jar. Maybe not literal flour and oil, but the modern equivalents. An empty bank account before payday, a diagnosis that swallows every plan you had, a relationship or a career that has run completely dry. And into that exact kind of moment, this story asks a piercing question. What would you do if you were asked to give away your last handful of flour before you knew there would be more? That's the terrifying, beautiful center of this whole account. There's a reason this widow's story didn't stay buried in an ancient text. Centuries later, Jesus himself stood up in his hometown synagogue in Nazareth and deliberately brought her up. The religious leaders and neighbors in that room were proud of their heritage, confident that God's favor belonged to them by birthright. And Jesus reminded them of something uncomfortable, that in the days of Elijah, when the famine gripped the whole land, there were many widows in Israel, plenty of proper candidates for a miracle. Yet Elijah was sent to none of them. He was sent only to a widow in Zarephath, in the region of Sidon. A foreigner, an outsider, someone entirely outside the religious in group. Jesus used her story as a direct challenge to religious pride, to the assumption that God's grace flows only to the people who look right, worship correctly, or belong to the right nation. The widow of Zarephath became living proof that God has always moved toward the humble, the outsider, the person willing to trust him, regardless of their background, their status, or their resume of religious credentials. And that is really the heart of everything this story has to teach us. One woman, unnamed, unnoticed by kings and armies, chose obedience over fear in a moment of total scarcity. She had every reason to say no. She had a starving child to protect and a stranger's word as her only collateral. And yet her small, private yes rippled outward into something enormous. It sustained the last true prophet of God during Israel's darkest spiritual season. It produced the first resurrection recorded in Scripture, and centuries later it became the very example Jesus reached for to describe the shape of God's grace. So if you find yourself today staring into your own empty jar, whatever that looks like in your life, remember the widow of Zarephath. She didn't wait for the miracle before she trusted. She trusted, and the miracle followed. And sometimes that one small act of faith, offered in the middle of your own desert of despair, is exactly the thing that changes everything for you and for people you may never even know are watching.